Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. I wanted to follow up on a podcast, an episode I released 2 weeks ago, and that was episode 499, a simple trick to finding great fortune in the follow-up. So I'm following up on an episode on follow-up. Actually, today, what that episode was about was following up when people don't respond to your follow-up. What I want to do today is I want to focus on talking about the follow-up itself, the initial follow-up. And for example, let's say you're on a job interview and following up after that. Or you had the opportunity to pitch a product or your product or your service to somebody, following up on that. Following up on introductions that you hope will lead to other introductions. Basically keeping people on your radar. And in my mind, there's certain things that are very effective with respect to that follow-up, and other things I think that are counterproductive, if you will. So the first, and this stems from a conversation I had with somebody who was looking for a job, and they had an interview, and they reached out to me. Hey, I had the interview, thought it went well, and what should I do next? And so I kind of gave them some advice on what I think they ought to be doing. And there was also somebody else I interviewed or who I was talking to, and they learned that they didn't get the job. But the person asked, just stay in contact because we may have other positions. We liked you, it's down to 2 people. We didn't go with you, but we liked you. Stay in contact. It's hard for us to find good people, and maybe we can create a position for you. So there are a couple different opportunities there for follow-up, and this certainly works in the business world, the small business world, where you sit and you meet with somebody and you go through a proposal with them, and they're not quite ready to buy, or it might be a situation where they go with somebody else, and you can throw your hands up and say, "Well, I lost that one," and totally move on. Or there are things you can do to kind of stay in contact with respect to that. Obviously, if you get the job or you get the client, get the assignment, you're in there and you're serving, and it's a different cadence. But in these situations where it doesn't quite work out or hasn't quite worked out yet, there are certainly things I believe that you can do to help make yourself that much more on people's radar, because things change. Things change all the time. So the first commentary I have with respect to following up, to the extent possible, and I always try and find an address, is send a handwritten note. Sure. You can follow up with email. I think email's great if that's what you're inclined to do. And there are a lot of times I don't have a physical address to mail a handwritten note. And I will go with an email. I absolutely will go with an email. And there are situations where you're interviewing and asking, in these days and times where a lot of people are working from home, it can feel a little off asking for a mailing address. Maybe a little too forward, a little too, a little too risky to do that. And depending upon who I'm talking to in the situation, I won't ask for a mailing address. And there's, I guess, a couple reasons for that. I want if I'm going to send a follow-up, I want it to be certainly a handwritten note. I want it to come out of the blue. I want it to surprise people. Few people follow up. Few people I talk to will follow up with an email and say, "Hey, thanks for your time." Very few people will. of the people who follow up, even a fewer amount will send a handwritten note. There's something to me that's special about a handwritten note. If you ever make it to my office, you will see that the office is ringed with handwritten notes. I staple them to the wall. I don't know what that says about my office. There's a wooden piece of trim around the top of the between the wall and the ceiling, and I just staple away, and it's completely full, and I move on to other rooms. And if I get a handwritten note, that's where they go. I have about 20 that I need to put up, and I get a lot of handwritten notes. Maybe because I talk about handwritten notes. Maybe it's because I do handwritten notes. I just think there's something special to that. And when I send handwritten notes, it gets a different reaction than when I send an email. Email's easy. You pull it up, you just kind of type. There's autocorrect, there's auto type. A lot of times anymore, it completes sentences for me when I write emails. And so I know when people send me emails, well, even with Outlook anymore, it suggests, it gives you suggestions for what to say. So I just know there's not as much care and effort that goes into it. But I know when somebody takes the time to write me a handwritten note, that there's something special to that. It's their handwriting. They did it. And wasn't an assistant, somebody's assistant. They had, follow up or anything like that. So I think those handwritten notes are important, and that would be the first thing I would recommend. There are people out there that use services like send out cards. I don't have anything against send out cards. To me, it's just not the same as somebody writing a handwritten note. And I know that will charge up somebody with send out cards, get them, might make them defensive about it. That's my personal view. I know send out cards can mimic my handwriting. I don't know if my handwriting's never the same twice. I'll write somebody a card, make a big mistake in it, and just rewrite another card. And my handwriting's not the same. It's just, my handwriting is so entrenched in my personality. Years ago, I stopped writing longhand. I just kind of print everything. It's very unique, and I don't know. That's just my feeling on it. But if you're going to do nothing else, then certainly send out cards. I know a lot of people who use it, and that's great. I just don't hold it in the same high esteem as somebody who's actually taken a pen and put it to paper in a note card and sent it off. And there are those who will argue against using note cards that profile your business. I get it. I have thank you notes that are generic. I bought a box of 20 on Amazon, or excuse me, I bought a box of 100 on Amazon for $23. I know it's 23 cents a piece. These cards are decent sized cards, quality cards, a whole variety in there. Lots of room to write. Good solid cardstock to write on. I'm very comfortable with them, and I continually buy cards and try and find opportunities to write them. Just because I know how I feel when I get a handwritten note, and I can only imagine that others have a similar feeling. As compared to getting nothing at all. Certainly, it's a slam dunk. But even with respect to getting an email, emails are nice, and if follow up. If all you can do is send an email, a lot of times that's all I can do because I don't have a physical address, and I do take the time to look. I do take the time to try and figure it out. And I'm not always successful. And if I'm not successful, then it's just an email. Or if I don't have an email, then I'll go with a LinkedIn message. At any rate, I'm partial to a handwritten note. We can debate about that another time. But let's talk about the substance of what should be in follow-up. I mean, the handwritten note is just, hey, it was great talking to you. Thanks for taking the time. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. The follow-up email, same thing. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. Now what I'm talking about is the ongoing follow-up. Let's say the person who didn't get the job. And hey, stay in touch. We might have other opportunities. What do those follow-up emails look like? And those certainly can be emails. So I don't think you need to, do a whole lot with respect to handwritten notes. But what do those emails look like? What does the email look like when they're still thinking about it? When they're not quite ready to buy, or maybe when they've gone with somebody else and you're kind of on the outside looking in. What does that sort of follow up look like? Now, a lot of the follow up I get from people are akin to, "Hey, I'm still here. Um, you know, I'm still here. Send me business. Hire me." And it's all very, very self-serving. Hey, look at me. I'm here. I still want you as a client. I still think I would be great. And that certainly is follow-up, but I, you know, there's not a lot of substance to that. When I read those, when I see those, I'm like, okay, yeah, I figured. I figured you'd want business. I mean, I wouldn't expect to get an email from somebody saying, "Hey, it was great talking to you last year. Just to let you know, we're no longer taking clients." I wouldn't expect to get something like that. I would assume if they're still in business, they're taking clients, and that they're out there. The types of things I think that sort of follow up should be very value laden. Now, what do I mean by value laden? Let me give you a couple of examples. One example, this is a personal example. Years ago, I have a financial advisor. Shout out to Eric Thompson. Eric Thompson's been our financial advisor, my wife and I's financial advisor, 20 plus years. Great, certainly a great financial advisor. I'm not going to say he's the best. I don't know. I don't know how you judge those things. We have a great relationship with him. And this is how it started. We were introduced to him years ago, and it was just kind of our financial advisor left a firm, but there were some monies that were left behind. So Eric kind of knew what our total holdings were. He knew where we had monies, but he only had a really small piece of it. And he would just follow up from time to time with, the one thing that kind of pushed us over the edge, taking everything, all our investments, and putting with him. He called me up one day in December, and he said, you need to do X, Y, and Z before year end. Just want to let you know, here's a play for you. You need to do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, okay. I was totally stunned. I'm just kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, Eric, those monies aren't even with you. Why are you telling me this? I wasn't mad. I was just totally befuddled that he would do that for us. And he says, I don't know. I can't answer why your advisor is not doing that. I'm just letting you know. I know, and kind of have a sense as to where your money's at, and this is what I think you should do. And it'll save you X amount in taxes or whatever it was. You just need to do this. I went home and talked to my wife about it. I'm like, this is, we need to do this. I don't know why we're not hearing from our advisor, but let's go ahead and do this. And I think we need to have a serious conversation about changing advisors, because our advisor's not on the front end of thinking about us. So that's a value added follow up. So for example, back to the person who didn't get the job, but stay in touch with us. Rather than just saying, yeah, I'm still interested in working for ABC company, following up and saying, hey, just quickly following up. I was out there reading some industry publications and I stumbled across this article. I thought this might be of value to you. And then you might want to put in a closing line, obviously still interested in staying in contact. If you have positions that might work, for me, keep me in mind. But the front end of that is just value laden. And I know it's not always easy to come up with those sorts of things, but that's, you're not having to do it on a daily basis. Maybe it's, every other month, once a quarter, you're coming up with something. And it might be something that they're totally not interested in, or it might be something that they probably saw or maybe saw, but it's more the gesture. Hey, I saw this out there. But you can get out there and you can search. You can do a Google search. If you're in the SEO business, or you're in marketing, or you're in beverages, you can get out there and you can do searches and find things that are out there. It's the beautiful thing about Google. You can be on top of all of this stuff with a search. You can even set Google up to fire. There are services out there. I think Google will allow you to do it when you see these keywords. Let me know, and it kind of keeps you in the loop. But those are the kinds of things you want to be following up with, just to say, hey, I'm still interested, in a subtle sort of way. Keep me on your radar is what you're saying, but I want to show you that I'm offering value as well. And that's a hard thing to ignore. Again, most people don't follow up. And so if you have a consistent pattern of following up, and it's more than just, hey, keep me in mind, want to be your client, or I want you as my client, or I want a job. But if you continue to follow up, and that follow up is value laden, you're going to put yourself ahead of a lot of people. Yes, you're going to meet with some disappointment. You still might not get that job. You still might not get that client. But it never hurts you. It never hurts you to do those things. Obviously it doesn't cost any money. The handwritten follow-up card, 23 cents for the card, whatever, 58 cents, 60 cents, whatever it takes to mail it for less than $1, a little bit of ink. You've kind of set yourself apart. Sending off an email. As far as I know, emails still really cost nothing other than time. Searching for an article. You never know where those things go. You never know where those gestures go. You're on somebody's radar. You're making a great impression. You might never get a job with that company, but that person might leave and show up somewhere else. That person might be talking to someone who's looking for someone like you and giving them your name. So I think there's real power in this sort of follow-up, being distinctive by following up with a handwritten note, and then ongoing follow-up with true value that somebody's going to look at and say, this person's really interested. This person's doing something with their lives. They have something to offer, and they're working hard even without the job. I need to try and get them in my corner. And you can be cynical and say, yeah, once they get the job, it's all going to fall apart. You know what? I'd rather have somebody who works hard on the front end, take a chance on somebody who's working hard and being distinctive on the front end and setting themselves apart, than somebody who's doing nothing on the front end. Just how I roll. So anyhow, something to think about with respect to follow-up as you try and stay in the job market, or as you try and continue to generate clients, or keep people on your radar. Handwritten notes are key, and value-added follow-up is perfect.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.